Hi, welcome back. And now we're going to conclude with Chapter 7, titled After the End. When I shared this book with others, the questions usually fell into three categories. First, what advice would I give to someone interested in pursuing enlightenment? Second, how do you know when you're actually enlightened? And last, what is my everyday perspective like now? I'll conclude the book by answering these questions. With regards to enlightenment, the best advice I could give is that you first establish enlightenment as your primary goal, your only goal, your main objective, the only thing you care about, one-pointedness. It is crucial that you establish a clear and conscious agenda in terms of what you really want out of life. Otherwise, you will find yourself at the whim of others' agendas or your own unconscious agenda, which is generally the tendency to simply recreate the initial trauma of your past over and over and over again. Also, it doesn't matter whether you consider your main agenda to be the pursuit of enlightenment, happiness, or peace, love, or harmony. Because if any of those things are your main agenda in life, then you are essentially committing yourself to a life without struggle. The fruits of your focus will bring you a life without struggling against reality. The most direct practice is to simply drop every struggle as you become aware of it, no matter how subtle, whether it be meditating, or dealing with a difficult person in our life. The practice is always the same, which is to boldly give up the struggle. Just let go. This practice becomes more difficult as you realize how many internal struggles you experience on a daily basis. This is why it is so vital that you first establish enlightenment, peace, happiness, etc. as your main agenda and worth the challenging journey. If you examine what is at the root of our struggle with reality, you will find a deep-seated fear or mistrust of the unknown. So once you establish that your main agenda is to pursue enlightenment, then the practice begins with deepening your trust in the unknown or unseen reality. This is a good time for a gut check and evaluation of just how much faith you actually have in whatever your belief system happens to be. In the privacy of your own mind, look to see if you actually do trust God or Jesus Christ or Allah or Brahman or the universe, etc. with your life. If you find that you do not have a genuine and deeply abiding trust in something specific, then you must be honest with yourself and realize that you will have to summon up the courage to face the unknown. If you find that you really can trust your life to the hands of your personal view of God, then you need to use this trust so completely, or use this trust to completely surrender your life to that which you trust. By surrendering your life, you are demonstrating a trust in the whole and your place in it, as opposed to relying on your own limited view. As you surrender your life more and more, you will notice that the internal resistance to the act of surrendering is based on your habitual need to build and sustain your sense of self. It seems that if we don't continually reaffirm our sense of self with internal dialogue and efforts to control the external world, then we will be left with no foundation to stand on. But it is in this groundless ground that we will find our true home. Here, in this foundationless space, we discover our true nature. and the true nature of reality itself. When you truly surrender your life to God, reality, etc., you will discover a faith in even the most puzzling aspects of life. Since even these mysteries are understood to be God, when we surrender ourselves, the insight we are rewarded with invariably results in an even deeper trust, which enables us to even deeper surrender, which leads to a deeper insight. And so it goes on and on. I realize how abstract all this may seem. This principle applies to every aspect of our lives, so I have laid it out very generally. But to make it even more easily understood, I will give an example of how this might look in your everyday life. Deciding on your agenda would be most likely include a lot of serious inward reflection upon what you really want out of life. Perhaps enlightenment is not something you are passionate about. After considerable reflection, you may decide that you're more passionate about your career or saving the earth or making some music, etc., etc. But if you do decide that the pursuit of enlightenment is indeed your main agenda, then I suggest you be very clear about this from the very beginning, resolute in your pursuit. When you meet with conflict in your daily life, instead of desperately defending yourself, you will remember your main agenda of peace. Consequently, the wisdom in not struggling with whatever reality presents. This brings us to the first step, which is trust. Trusting could refer to summoning up the courage to face the void when sitting in silent meditation. Also, trusting could refer to having faith that reality is ultimately perfect despite the horrible atrocities that we all know that take place on this earth every single day. The most direct teachings on enlightenment are based on a trust that right here and right now we are actually in heaven, and that if we just investigate this aware space deeply enough, then we will inevitably see that this truth for ourselves. This trusting enables us to practice the second step, which is surrender. Surrender can refer to the practice of allowing yourself to disappear after a particularly intense meditation session. Or surrender could refer to the everyday experience we have when we meet with conflict. The reason that we deepen our sense of trust in reality is so that when we are confronted with the struggles of everyday life, we will have the courage to surrender to our experience instead of struggling with it. If we are vigilant in our commitment to stick to our main agenda of remaining struggle-free, then we will respond accordingly when we are faced with conflict. We can experience conflict with someone we know, or we might experience conflict when we simply hear about something we disagree with on the daily news. It is at this moment that we could either choose to build ourselves up by defending ourselves and our beliefs, or we could remind ourselves about our true agenda and simply let the whole thing go. The truth is that we have no control over the choices and values of others. And the sooner we realize this, the sooner we can give up our struggle against reality. When we do surrender to this struggle, whether it is a fear of annihilation during silent meditation or a conflict in our everyday life, we are rewarded with an insight. The insight may be as simple as realizing that it is easier and more peaceful to let your anger go, or the insight may be drastic with life-changing implications. Whether the insight is simple, profound, or anywhere in between, it will invariably lead to even more trust in reality. And so the cycle continues. Trusting leads to an ability to surrender, which leads to an insight, which leads to even more trust, etc., etc. So my best advice would be to continue this cycle of trust, surrender, and insight until you bottom out on the groundless ground of being. How do you know when you bottom out? Otherwise known as enlightenment. When you actually do bottom out, you won't have to ask yourself whether you've hit the bottom. You will recognize the ground of being as your rightful home. It will be more familiar than the sun and sky. You will effortlessly remember the ground of being just as you automatically remember the everyday world when you awaken from a dream. However, in the same way that you sometimes think that you have awakened from a dream, only to find yourself still inside of a dream moments later, you can also mistake a single moment of awakening to be true enlightenment. That is probably why it is customary in some traditions to wait 10 years after the experience of enlightenment before proceeding to teaching it. Because if you woke up from a dream 10 years ago, it is safe to assume that you actually did wake up from the dream. On another level, it could also be said that even true enlightenment is still part of a bigger dream. That is to say that any experience is always and necessarily a form of imagination or a function of awareness. Enlightenment means only that you recognize that your true nature and the true nature of reality is this formless, timeless, aware space that you're experiencing right now. I realize that this answer may be too abstract to satisfy, that it answers the question of how will you know when you're enlightened. So if you're looking for specific changes in your behavior that might occur because of enlightenment, I would say that there definitely will be certain changes that you notice. One thing you may notice is that you don't find yourself complaining about anything anymore. And I don't mean anything superficial like complaining about the fly in your soup or your sports team lost the game. I mean that you don't have any true complaints about your everyday life or reality at large. It's unlikely that you'll be caught up in a belief that something is wrong with people or wrong with society or wrong with the government, etc. On the contrary, you will probably have a keen sense that even the worst things that you are aware of are somehow necessary in the overall scheme of things, just like water finding its own level. Everything seems to balance out in time. That is why I have said that enlightenment is an actual shift in perspective. It is like widening your perspective enough to recognize the harmony that couldn't be seen when your vantage point was too narrow. But the most obvious change I noticed was the complete about face in terms of seeking. In one moment, all seeking dropped away and has never returned. From that moment on, I not only lost interest in reading, but meditation as well. I would sometimes try to read, and just because I saw a good book lying around, but it was as if nothing could gain any traction and keep my interest. I only remember trying to meditate once, and it was weird because I was accustomed to a contrast in experience when I meditated before. However, this time when I immediately noticed that when I sat down to meditate, nothing changed. There's only the mind. And it is the same mind whether you're meditating or chopping wood. It would be very easy to say that life becomes meditation itself. But that sounds like a terrible cliche. Instead, I would say that wherever I go, I notice the aware space that everything is happening. If I am at a football game, I am aware of the aware space in which the game is happening in. If I am in a shopping mall, I am aware of the aware space in which all of the stores are appearing in. No matter what I am experiencing, I am acutely aware of the only constant in my life, and that is the same aware space that is experiencing is happening right now. That is how I would describe my everyday perspective now. It would be very tempting to say that being aware of the aware space that everything is happening in is like always having a companion with you, or having a familiar soundtrack playing in the background. Sometimes it even seems that the mind is a wonderful toy, always at your disposal. But the reason that I hesitate to say all these things is that if they were true, it is because they all suggest a duality, as if there is an I that possesses this mind. The reason that it sounds like there is two, a me and a mind, is because awareness is experiencing itself. So awareness is the subject, I, experiencing itself as the object, the mind. That is why I have been drawn to emphasizing aware space rather than the word awareness. In all the varying mystical paths, different words are used to describe the ultimate reality. Some say that there is only awareness. Some say that there's only mind, the self, God, this, that, etc. I happen to resonate with the word awareness because that is the word that I thought all those other words were pointing to. But after an embarrassing amount of time contemplating this, I now see awareness as just a quality of aware space. I find it more accurate to say that aware space is truly all there is, and that it has two primary qualities. The first quality of aware space is the capacity for existence. Space, capacity. The second quality of aware space is the function of being aware, awake, mindful, alive, sentient, etc. Like yin and the yang, aware space is an inseparable whole, but we mistakenly refer to it as awareness because the aware aspect of aware space is active or dominant, whereas the space aspect of aware space is passive or inert and therefore goes unnoticed. So I couldn't help but notice the similarities between the relationship of aware space and the male-female relationship. The feminine aspect of aware space would obviously be the space aspect, because the reproductive aspect of the female is best represented by the womb or the passive egg, the space. The reproductive aspect of the male would be best represented by the active sperm, the fertilizer which enlivens the egg. It should come to no surprise that our own reproductive systems mirrors the same system that produced the world in the first place. It is the inseparable union of aware space that resulted in the production of life, otherwise known as the universe. In this universe, it is also the inseparable union of male and female that results in the continued reproduction of this life. The bottom line and inescapable fact of life is that there is only this aware space. In the infinite variations of appearances that come and go within this aware space. The best way I could think of describing how I experience the aware space that we all exist in and as would be to describe the world as a magical room of sorts, or even a crystal ball. I see the world appearing as an endless succession of visions materializing in a crystal ball that I'm staring into. Another way to describe it would be to say that I see aware space manifesting as some kind of aware room or mental landscape, that it is the space for everything that has ever existed or could ever exist. The amazing part about this aware room is that everything that anyone has ever experienced, including everything that you are experiencing right this second, is taking place in this magical room. The room itself is changeless, but the scenery inside the room shifts and transforms to whatever is being imagined. Even if you die and go to heaven or nirvana, that experience will be taking place in the same magic room that you are looking into right now. It does not matter if we are talking about heaven, the astral worlds, the bottom of the ocean, or the bathrooms at Grand Central Station. They were all appearances in this ever-changing magical room that we never ever left. The reason I point this out is because there is a prevailing notion among us that one day we will go to a different place, and that place is our true home. I think that we sense this because it is true in some way, just not in the way we expected. I'm still not sure exactly what it is that we expect. Do we expect to travel billions of miles into deep space, take a quick left past the quasars, and then travel through an asteroid belt until we finally find the golden stairs that lead to this other place that we'll call heaven? If heaven refers to our true home, then heaven is not a place at all. Our true home is the unchanging magic room itself, the aware space that everything exists in. We can't see the magic room because it is not a thing itself, but rather space for the appearances that come and go within it. Sometimes the magic room is flooded with mountain scenery. Sometimes the magic room is flooded with celestial realms. But the only constant is the magic room itself, space. In conclusion, heaven, in the truest sense of the word, is actually right here and right now. We have never left our true home. The aware space that we're experiencing right now is both the supreme source of reality and everything that manifests within reality. Nothing could be truer than knowing that this is it. Thank you very much.